Always great to see Chris Sims, Pro Football Talk Live co-host, and of course the contributor to Football Night in America. Been a while since we've seen you. A lot to catch up on here, but let me start with I guess, still in the headlines with Brandon Aiyuk. Not a question of if, but more like when and where. What do you think happens in this situation?
Yeah, I think ultimately I'm with you. I think that the 49ers, Brandon Aiyuk, I do think they're going to part ways, right? I don't think it's going to be I don't think it's a guarantee, right? We heard Shanahan yesterday say he's still open to keeping Aiyuk. And I think that if he doesn't get the right deal for a guy who's a first round pick and certainly a number one receiver, then, he'll bite the billet and deal with the situation. But I mean, yeah, we're far down the road. We're obviously hey, go out there, see if you can find a deal, find a trade partner. There are teams willing to trade for Brandon Aiyuk, right? I think the big thing, too, is what teams is he's willing to go to because he has power in this situation. But it does seem inevitable that it's going to happen here.
But the Niners were preparing for this. They drafted wide receivers, and it's almost as if it was a foregone conclusion that either Debo or Aiyuk was going to go. But I can't blame Brandon Aiyuk for wanting to get paid. I think we look at it and go, why would you go at age 26 from a Super Bowl contender to maybe a team? Well, he's not going to go to the Patriots, but Steelers or the Browns.
Yeah, Steelers, Browns, right? Commanders are probably in that conversation as well as one of the teams you hear about. Yeah, I think more about he wants to be paid where he thinks he deserves to be paid. And I think that's the big conversation with some of these guys out there, right? I mean, from all due accounts of what you hear from people around the league a little bit, right? There was, hey, wait, I want this much money. I want this much money. And then Amon-Ra St. Brown and A.J. Brown signed new deals. And all of a sudden the line of demarcation or what he wanted as far as his new contract changed. So I think that changed things as well. The 49ers have a lot of other contracts they're trying to balance out here. But that's the big question to me, Dan. And I think it's a little bit with CeeDee Lamb. Listen, I'm a guy that would sit here and tell you A.J. Brown, Chase, Jamar Chase, Tyreek Hill, Justin Jefferson, they're in another class, in my opinion, from the rest of the NFL. So I don't think anybody should be paid quite that. But I think that's where really it's the rubber hits the road there is Aiyuk's mad, and he thinks he should be paid up in that category or somewhere close to it.
We saw the situation unfold overnight. ESPN article on the Eagles that looking back on what happened last season, they had a great start. They had a terrible finish. Now you're hearing the relationship between quarterback and coach is not great. I don't know if it's salvageable. You bring in a new offensive coordinator. Where are the Eagles right now in the pecking order of teams in the NFC, given what we just read about?
Yeah, right. Well, listen, the NFC, I don't think has a ton of what I would call Super Bowl caliber type of football teams, right? We got a lot of playoff teams, but I think when you get into Super Bowl caliber teams, the Eagles are certainly on that short list. Come on, it's an all-star team. It's arguably the best O-line in football. It might be the best dual receivers in football. The D-line's probably the best in football, right? The rest of their defense ain't bad either. So they got a lot of stuff there that should not be acceptable with the way that year ended last year. I think the big thing is, and you hear a lot of this, and listen, I don't know the exact story, but yeah, there's been issues. There is issues, whether it's with how players feel about Jalen Hurts in the locker room or even Nick Sirianni in the locker room. There's definitely issues there. So where there's smoke, there's fire, and I think everybody around the league kind of knows that, right? Jalen Hurts is not loved by everybody in the locker room, certainly not. And I think that Nick Sirianni has some of that same stuff there in the locker room as well that they're dealing with. But their big thing from last year, Dan, was the coordinators. That was the issue, right? Nick Sirianni moving on to the Indianapolis Colts. He is one of the best offensive minds in football. And they certainly had a guy there in Brian Johnson who was not ready for NFL football offensive coordinator duty. And then we know on the defensive side of the ball, it was really the same issue. So I expect a better team this year because Vic Fangio is as good as it gets. And then, of course, we know we got Kellen Winslow there, who I do think is a step up. Right?
Kellen Moore. Kellen Moore.
Sorry, Kellen Winslow. We don't want him, no.
Old school. Yeah, it's just weird that a quarterback goes to the line of scrimmage and he and his wide receiver decide they're going to go rogue here with a game on the line in Seattle. That was highlighted here.
Speaks to a lot. Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. Like I would, if I ever did that, right, and did it, I played the few games that I did with John Gruden, you would know before I got off the sideline that I did something wrong and that he would lay into me. I mean, even I remember I was on the phone with my dad. My dad was in shock, right? I can't even imagine doing that. If I did that with Parcells, oh my gosh, I don't know if I'd been on the Giants the next day, right? So, yeah, that's certainly a disconnect between coach, quarterback, and maybe culture altogether there in Philadelphia last year.
We're talking to Chris Sims, Pro Football Talk Live co-host, Football Night in America analyst as well. It's gotten to the point where we look at these quarterbacks and we're like, yeah, you should start. And it didn't used to be that way. You needed 1, 2, maybe even 3 years before you got in. Now it's C.J. Stroud kind of changed things. I'm not going to say ruin things, but certainly changed the expectations for Caleb Williams and maybe Jaden Daniels this year.
Yeah, of course. Well, I'm one that's in favor of always playing the guy, right? As long as you feel like he's somewhat physically and mentally ready to take on the challenge. To me, the game reps, they can't be emulated in practice. No way, right? So that to me is the most important thing. Definitely. There are cases every now and then, right? Drake May would have up in a guy up in New England where I'd go, I don't know if I feel that way. There's mechanical issues. There's decision-making issues. It might do him some good to sit on the bench for a year, work on some of those things and see what the NFL game is all about. But the rest of the crew, that's why I love them so much coming out in the draft. I thought they were about as NFL ready as I had seen in a while as far as a group of quarterbacks and know how to play the quarterback position. Jaden Daniels, Caleb Williams, we know, no doubt they're going to start. It's the other two guys that I think it's dicey, right? You get to Bo Nix. Hey, there's some real talent and competition there. Jarrett Stidham's a hell of a player. He's got starting quarterback caliber traits there, right? But we know ultimately Sean Payton's going to want to get his guy. Bo Nix looks like he could be Drew Brees Jr. All right, so there's that situation. And then who's the fourth I'm missing?
J.J. McCarthy.
That's another one, very similar. It's Sam Darnold, starting caliber talent, right? I mean, the 49ers were thoroughly impressed by him last year. So he's capable of running that offense up there and making it look good. But I still think ultimately you're going to see McCarthy somewhere in the early part of the season, if not to start the season when it's all said and done.
I had a pro personnel person tell me that the Jets' talent level is elite. That their defense elite. I mean, there's a lot of great things about the Jets, but why do I have this question mark on how good they can be?
Yeah, I think we got to see the O-line, right? You got to see it to believe it. I think that's the first thing. We haven't seen a good O-line there in New York on either team in quite some time. Is Aaron Rodgers still who he thinks he is, right? I have questions about that. His last year in Green Bay was not very good, right? I mean, it's so, and then that last year not playing at all either. And then being the age he is and the injury he had, I certainly question that to a degree. But everything else, Dan, I mean, it's top notch there. I mean, we know they got pretty good talent at receiver. They got decent tight ends, a stable of running backs, and the defense is as talented as it gets in football at all three levels. To me, the other part with the Jets, Dan, is scheme. It is scheme. You know, they play that Seattle scheme on defense. It's very good, but it doesn't necessarily create turnovers and win games for them sometimes, like Cleveland Browns defense did last year, right? They're multiple. They do crazy stuff. They had some games their offense played like crap, but you went, oh my gosh, the defense is going to win the game by themselves. And they did that. The Jets, because they're so simple there, I wish they were a little more creative. I think they could get more out of the defense as far as playmaking. And then, of course, we know Nathaniel Hackett in the offense is certainly a question mark, too. So I'm with you. It's like big-time talent, but I'd like to see a little first before, we start pounding the Super Bowl chant here.
When do you make your Super Bowl picks?
Probably late August, right? Like that right before that week before the regular season. But I've definitely been thinking about it lately. I certainly have.
We brought this up on the show. I did. Is Eli Manning going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer?
Ooh, I don't think he is a first ballot Hall of Famer type talent. I certainly think he's a Hall of Famer. But to me, I'm old school, and that first ballots are like guys where it's like they're in a special. Oh, Ray Lewis, we don't have to think about it. Lawrence Taylor, no doubt about it. John Elway, what? Come on, get out of here. You're in your own special room. Eli Manning, damn good. We know that, right? But there's a lot of other ththings on his resume that I think you could sit there and go, well, that's not first ballot Hall of Fame worthy.
Can you be objective and with the following question? Who had a better career, Eli or your father?
Well, I think Eli had a better career because he got to play in that second Super Bowl and win it, right? Where my dad, of course, was hurt in Week 14 in 1990, and then they went on and won the Super Bowl with Jeff Hostetler. So I think that kind of gives the edge to Eli Manning.
But your dad was a better regular season quarterback.
I think my dad was a better talent and a better player. I'll tell you that. I don't know if his career was good, but I think when you get into the talent and the player and maybe the talent he had around him on offense, like most people my age can't name one receiver that played for my dad, right? You go through the Eli Manning Giants and you go, damn, it's one all-star after another on wide receiver. So there are some things there that's good conversation. Eli's career's better, but I do think Dad was a better player. I do. I'll say that.
But if David Tyree drops that ball, is Eli Manning a Hall of Famer?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know. We'd be right on the line there.
It'd be a no.
We would be. He certainly shouldn't have been the MVP of the Super Bowl. I know that for sure. Somebody on that defense, it was the greatest offense we ever saw ever.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes.
And 17-14 with Brady and Randy Moss and Wes Welker and crew, that was incredible. But we know Eli certainly had the clutch gene. There's no question in that.
Luke Kuechly is up for the Hall of Fame. First ballot Hall of Famer?
I think I do now because, again, Luke Kuechly, how many years did we go through and go, well, the best linebacker in football is Luke Kuechly. Oh, the second best linebacker is Luke Kuechly. That, to me, it jumps out to you. When you go through a period of time and there's no doubt you're the one or two or three best at your position for a consistent period of time, that to me is when you start talking about first ballot Hall of Famer.
Yeah, it's tricky, and I agree with you. There's certain players that you say their name and you go, oh, Hall of Famer.
Right.
And I don't know if that's the litmus test for who is a first ballot Hall of Famer. If I just say this name and you respond, does that mean you're a first ballot Hall of Famer?
I think it usually is. I mean, there might be a little nuance every now and then, but I think the ones that hit you in the face, and it goes back to like the Deion Sanders, right? Like upper room that he talks about. I do agree with him there. There's a Hall of Fame within the Hall of Fame. Reggie White, Lawrence Taylor, Deion Sanders, Peyton Manning, right? Tom Brady was in there, right? They're in a little different class than some of those other people I saw in the Hall of Fame when I go there and walk around.
And I don't have any problem if we had a different shade of gold jacket for first ballot Hall of Famer. Like I think
it should be gold. It should be a gold. Literally have a little gold in it, like the Notre Dame helmet or something. You got to speckle some gold on there. They get that to be in the special room.
I think if you're a first ballot Hall of Famer, you deserve to be singled out. So then people realize we're all Hall of Famers. That guy's a first ballot Hall of Famer.
I would agree with that 100%. I would. Yeah. Again, there's certain players that just were above and beyond, right? And I think we've named a few of them throughout time where, yeah, I mean, again, if you hear stories about my dad playing the Eagles back in the day, the first 5 meetings were like, Reggie White, how do we stop Reggie White? That's first ballot Hall of Famer. And when I played against Ray Lewis and the Baltimore Ravens, it was a very similar conversation.
I always thought Ed Reed was more valuable than Ray Lewis.
Well, it's a good conversation. I mean, again, there's another guy. There's no doubt we're talking about, right, in his own room, first ballot. Ed and Troy Polamalu during that time when you played quarterback were torture for quarterback because you were like, wait, why are they here? They should be doing this. What is he doing? Are they telling him to do this or is he just freelancing? Right. So they had great instincts and they really knew offense and what the offense was trying to do. Really, really special player.
Good to talk to you, bud. We'll talk to you soon. Thank you, Chris.
All right, buddy. Be good. Say hi to the guys.
Chris says hi, guys. Chris Sims, Pro Football Talk Live co-host and contributor to Football Night in America.